Hey friends, so a couple of weeks ago we posted an episode of Priority Messages called Don't Be Afraid to Ask Yourself Hard Questions. In that episode we talked about the importance of doing this so that you can gain better self-knowledge and understanding. This video is sort of related because it goes a bit further in talking about the subject of self-examination. So if you want to check that one out too, it's up on the channel right now. So anyway, when I was younger, maybe 14, 15 or so, I would say, I thought it was kind of weird and ridiculous when older people would say things like, I realized some things about myself that I didn't know, or I am not sure of who I am right now. I need to get back in touch with that. Because, I thought, how the hell do you make it all the way to adulthood and not know yourself when you are you? Know what I mean? Plus, aren't you supposed to know everything when you're an adult? Anyway, as I myself got older, I began to understand how wrong I was for ever thinking that, because life is, if nothing else, a constant series of surprises, and many of them make you question a whole lot of things. I couldn't have possibly understood this as a teenager, but at 51, yeah. Anyway, so we talk about self-examination and self-discovery a lot on this channel because, well, it's good for your mental health to really know yourself. It's the best way to meet your own needs and find happiness in your daily life. And it's also instrumental to your growth. Knowing and understanding why you do the things that you do is one of the most empowering things you can ever do for yourself. When you understand something, you gain cause over it, which then gives you the power to change it when you want or need to. Getting to that place, though, takes a healthy dose of being honest with yourself. And, of course, it takes work, too, because just about anything that's truly worth doing always does. This is definitely something you can do on your own, and some people do, but some people really struggle with that at times, and many will choose to enlist the help of a mental health professional, such as a therapist or someone similar, to help them really crack the code on what's going on inside. The latter is a great choice, by the way. Let's get that out of the way right now. There is absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help from an outside source when you feel like you need it. It's a healthy, responsible thing to do, and there is no shame in it whatsoever. Unfortunately, things like that, like therapy, are still so stigmatized in today's world, and I hate that. People continue to think that therapy is for crazy people or whatever, but they could not be any more wrong about that if they tried. I won't get too deep in the weeds on that subject right now, so I'll just put it this way. It's okay to need help. It's okay to be not okay, friends, and you will never hear me say different on this channel or any other platform for that matter. Now, with that said, have you ever felt like maybe you don't know yourself as well as you should? Have you ever felt like maybe you're out of touch with yourself, like there's something within you that just isn't sitting right? Do you feel like you're not you, and as a result, you're doing things you don't want to do or behaving in ways that you don't want to behave? Maybe this is a sign that you need to work on a little self-examination. Maybe this means that you need to get in touch with you a little more than you have been. What are some signs that this is the case? Let's talk about a couple. Actually, let's talk about 10 of them. Number 1. You lack compassion towards yourself. When someone that we care about makes a mistake or messes something up, we tend to be compassionate towards them more often than not. We're forgiving and understanding that everyone makes mistakes, and that's okay. Yet, when we are the ones who make mistakes or mess something up, we tend to be pretty unforgiving sometimes. Friends, if we can be compassionate and understanding towards the people that we love, in theory, we should be that way with ourselves too. Some of us don't do that and beat ourselves up mercilessly for things that we really should learn to forgive ourselves for. It is generally because we are very aware of, and sometimes hanging on to, a sense of shame about it. So if this is you, then figuring out why you do this, why you can forgive others but not yourself, is something that you definitely need to look into in order to know yourself a little better. Number 2, you are hypercritical of yourself. I often say that nobody in the world judges us more harshly than we tend to judge ourselves, and I am very confident when I make that statement because it is something that I have really struggled with at various times in my life. But let me share 2 things that I have learned about this that have really helped me reframe my thinking on it. 1, sometimes we do this for a subconscious reason that isn't actually negative. Sometimes we do it because we want to motivate ourselves to do better, to be better. Yeah, I know. I used to think that was BS too, until I really sat and thought about the things I was most critical of myself about. Those were things that honestly really did need some improvement, and sometimes it actually worked in motivating me to make those improvements. So this is actually not always just a negative thing, even if it is an insensitive and clumsy way of going about it. And secondly, while everyone's reasons for self-criticism are different, the root cause is usually connected to our self-esteem. When that suffers a hit, whether it be from childhood or later trauma or whatever, or rejection, or who knows, lots of things ding that, so to speak, it inevitably creates a shift in your self-perception, even if it's just a temporary one. Here is where self-criticism tends to be born, and some of us just run with it way further than we should. A lot of the same principles we talked about in number 1 apply here. You would never walk over to a friend and say, "Hey, so-and-so, you're stupid and fat and ugly. You're terrible at your job and your family hates you." So why is it okay to say things like that to ourselves? Spoiler alert, it's not. And you are definitely not helping to repair or boost your self-esteem when you do it. So stop being so hard on yourself. Remember this basic rule of thumb. If you wouldn't say it to someone you love, then don't say it to yourself, because remember, you are also supposed to be someone that you love. Just saying. Number 3, you tend to cave in to other people's expectations of you. Are you a people pleaser? Do you tend to make decisions based on what you think people want from you versus what you really want? Do you consistently say yes to situations that you really, really want to say no to? Then this is one for you to do a deeper dive on, because there's a reason why you're putting everyone else's wants and needs and expectations ahead of your own. And it's probably because you're out of touch with your own priorities. I could go on about that one because it's such an important thing not to do. It's a recipe for unhappiness and unfulfillment to be constantly meeting other people's expectations instead of your own. But I'll simply say this. If you engage in this kind of behavior regularly, getting to the root of why you do it is really, really important, so that you can stop living for others and start living for yourself. Trust me on this one. Number 4, you feel unfulfilled in your career or other things you participate in, like groups or clubs, etc. You know how sometimes you feel like you are just doing the wrong things, like you're in the wrong place. You feel restless with your work. It brings you no joy, no fulfillment. You may even dread it. Well, maybe you're just in the wrong place. Maybe this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. Maybe things have run their course and it's time to move on to something or somewhere else. Once you figure that part out, well, the work is merely beginning. But getting back in touch with yourself will definitely make it easier and clarify that for you. Where are you supposed to be? What are you supposed to be doing? Well, what do you want to do? Those are all good questions to start with, and will get you on the road to feeling more fulfilled in those areas of your life. Number 5, you make your decisions based on fear or a sense of obligation. What kind of choices would you make for your life if you weren't afraid? If you didn't have to worry about being responsible for or answer to anyone? I will bet you a steak dinner that there are probably different decisions than you would make if you were listening to someone else's voice other than your own. Maybe that voice is fear. Maybe it's the voice of somebody else who you feel like you owe something to. This is going to sound rude, but I'm going to say it anyway. The only person you owe something to is you. Your needs and wants have to be at the forefront of your priority list, because I can promise you they aren't even on anyone else's, not even in like slot number 10. That's why you have to think about that when you make your decisions. There's nothing wrong with having caution, but when the caution sign starts morphing into a stop sign, you need to pay attention, and you need to pay attention to the reasons why, because it might be fear or obligation that's directing that, and you can't let that happen. Your needs and your wants matter too, and your priority should be making sure that they are filled. I cannot stress the importance of this enough. Number 6, your relationships always feel unsatisfying. You know how some people just never seem to be able to hang on to relationships of any kind, whether it be friends or romantic partners, etc. Is it because they just have bad luck, or they know how to pick them, as they say, or is it something else? I mean, I don't want to be rude here, but when I meet someone who has very few friends and they are all recent, meaning they haven't known them for long, and through further conversation I learned that they have also been married like 5 times. No offense, but I'm going to proceed with extreme caution, because there's a common denominator there, and it's not all those other people. Just saying. I see something beyond that common denominator. Actually, I see someone who really, really needs to get in touch with themselves, because they're going to keep repeating this unhealthy pattern until they do that work. Anyway, I think sometimes we can get stuck in a rut where everything feels unsatisfying to us, especially our interpersonal relationships. I can relate, because I was in this place at one time, and I can honestly say that the problem was, surprise, surprise, me. I was spending too much time going after things that were not for me, and abiding that time instead of doing a reboot, so to speak, and seeking out the things that were for me. I did finally do that, and after a misstep or two, I landed right where I was supposed to be, with whom I was supposed to be with, and I've honestly never been happier. But it took me a bit of soul searching. In other words, getting back in touch with myself and figuring out what I truly wanted from my relationships, and not settling for a single thing that I didn't want. So, if this is you, if you feel like something is consistently missing from your important relationships, getting back in touch with yourself is kind of step 1 in figuring out how to fill in those missing pieces of the puzzle. Number 7, you are not sure where your life is going. Not knowing where your life is going and what you're doing is not uncommon when you're young, or when you go through a major life change like a divorce or death of a close family member, etc. But that should not be your all-the-time feeling. You should, except for in times of flux, be pretty sure about what you want out of your life and where you want it to be. That doesn't mean those things are monolithic. Sometimes your direction and your priorities change. But if you're constantly asking yourself what direction your life is going, and you're wondering, what am I doing here? Where am I going? What's going on? Then it might be time to have a coming home meeting with yourself to try to figure that out. Number 8, you are stuck in problematic behavior cycles. You know how sometimes you feel like you're not making the best choices, but you continue making them anyway? That's a big sign that you need to get back in touch with yourself. The thing about choices is that they usually have options built in, and when the choices you are making are not healthy or good, you always have the option to make different ones. Making good choices is one of those things that sounds real easy in theory, but in execution, not so much. But one way to get started in doing that is, no doubt, figuring out why you're making those poor choices to begin with. And you do that by, you guessed it, getting in touch with your needs and wants, and figuring out how to remove the unhealthy mechanisms that are making you be stuck in those bad cycles to begin with. Number 9, you always feel alone. I think that feeling alone is probably one of the saddest human conditions there is. It's strange, too, how sometimes we can feel alone even when we aren't. Even if if you have ever felt alone in a room full of people, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Even when you're an extreme introvert or you feel like you don't need anyone else, people are social creatures by nature. We do need each other for more reasons than I could possibly ever cover in one video. So when you're feeling this way, like you're an island, even though you're not, then that's a big sign that you need to realign with your real self. This may sound a little woo-woo, but I'm telling you, it has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that sometimes we become things that we are not in order to please others, and that's where the feeling of being alone tends to come from. Getting back to your true self, the skin you authentically feel comfortable being in, will help that tremendously. Trust me on that one too. And number 10, you don't know your own boundaries. I saved this one for last because it's important, and it's something that I think we misunderstand about ourselves the most. I mean, boundaries, of course. If you were to ask most people what their hard boundaries are in relationships with others, or even with themselves, they would probably have difficulty coming up with a comprehensive answer. Or they may say, well, I don't know, I don't know what I don't like, but I'll know it when I see it. There's fundamentally nothing wrong with this per se, but deep down we tend to know the exact geographic location of our personal bridge too far. If you don't, and more importantly, if you don't enforce that boundary, you're going to get trespassers. That's just how it goes. So if you're finding yourself in a place where you feel those lines have blurred, that you may be okay with things that you are really not okay with, you're selling yourself out. Your boundaries are often the first line of defense against losing your way, friends. Know them, and I mean know them. And if you don't, take a step back from where you are and figure out what they are. There are few things that your future self will thank you more profusely for than that. So there you have it, 10 things that might be a sign that you may have to do some getting to know you better work with yourself. And something that I want to say also here, I think, and it's a good way to end this video, knowing yourself is just half the battle. You also have to learn to prioritize yourself. You have to take action with that knowledge. These things go hand in hand because, hey, you can know yourself all you want, but if you aren't meeting your needs or protecting yourself and your boundaries, then your work is not finished. That's all I've got for you this week. I'll be back next week with another priority message. Until then, take good care of yourselves. Bye.